Today we're going to be talking about variables. Variables are an important part of every programming language, and it's easy to assign variables in Python because there's no specific keyword to specify the type of variable, such as in Java. So, for example, if you wanted to make an integer variable, you would have to type int age equals to 10, for example. The variable's age has the value of 10. But in Python, you don't have to type integer, and it will recognize that the variable is an integer. So that is a basic numeric variable. There are two basic numeric variables in Python, integers and floats. So this one is an integer. The main difference between an integer and a float is that integers are a whole number, while a float is either it has a decimal point or it is a fraction. So you can call a variable measurement, and you write 17.5 or 1.75. Has a decimal, so it's a float, and it can also be a fraction. So if we call a variable fraction, we can assign it 3/2. That's also a float. So these two are floats, while this one is an integer. This is a float, it's an integer. Now let's move on to string variables. String variables are, they basically have a quotation mark. So for example, if we had a variable called weather, we can use quotation marks to call the variable and assign it the value sunny as a string variable. You can actually change between quotation marks and single quotes. So it doesn't matter whether you're using single quotes or double quotes, Python will still recognize it as a string. So if you change this to a string, Python will still recognize it as if you change this into a single quotes, Python will still recognize it as a string variable. Lastly, there is a Boolean variable, which is just true and false. So if you write sunny day, you can give it the value true. And another variable error occurred, you can give that the value false. So make sure you're typing the Boolean with the first letter capital. And that is important because if you don't, Python will not recognize it as a Boolean. You have to make sure you're typing it with a capital T and a capital F, respectively. So that is it with variables.